My friends, I finally bring it to you. Every fight to make after UFC 281. Now, before we get started, I do just want to say originally I was going to do every fight on the card, but then I realised we'd probably be here all day. So I think what I'm going to do is the winner and loser of every fight on the main card, and then just for the prelims, not the early prelims, just for the prelims, we're going to do the winner of every fight on the prelims, apart from one, and you can probably guess who that one's going to be. So starting off, we have Alex Pereira, who obviously beat Israel Adesanya to capture the UFC middleweight title at UFC 281. We can probably put Adesanya in here as well, because what's probably going to happen is an immediate title rematch, but personally I don't think that should happen. And I'll explain why. It's because even though we're in a new sport of MMA, and Pereira's only 1-0 against Izzy in MMA, and Izzy was winning that fight, technically on paper, he's 3-0 against Adesanya. And don't get me wrong, Adesanya deserves to get another title shot. He deserves to fight for his title again. But if we look at it on paper, Pereira's 3-0. I think Pereira would probably go 4-0 against him. So I think what we should do is we should do the winner of Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa. I think the reason we should do this is because Adesanya is probably going to be out until springtime of next year. I know he probably wanted to fight on 284 in Perth, but I don't see that happening. And it's definitely not going to happen against Pereira in a title rematch where that card is already stacked. So without giving away too much for my Adesanya pick, I think we should do the winner of Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa as the main event against Alex Pereira for the title on International Fight Week. And now we move on to Adesanya, who obviously lost his title at UFC 281. And let's be realistic, International Fight Week, we're probably going to see Adesanya Pereira 2. But obviously this is what I want to see and what I think should happen. So you could probably get at what I was hinting at with my Pereira pick. But I think Adesanya should fight the loser of Whittaker and Costa. And I'm saying this because I think Whittaker is going to beat Costa. Now, Pereira gets a fresh matchup anyway. You know, varying degrees of winnability for him. Whittaker could give him some options. I think he could beat Costa. But Adesanya has beat both of them. But I personally think Whittaker beat him in the second fight. So I think there's possibility for a trilogy. I think it'd be similar to the Volkanovski-Max Holloway where people are like, oh, well, I think that Holloway beat Volkanovski in the second one. So the UFC are like, well, okay, let's put on a third fight. But I do think Paulo Costa is going to lose to Whittaker, which is why I'm saying Adesanya should fight the loser, because Paulo Costa, Adesanya 2. I know Adesanya kind of, had him in the first fight and obviously ended up TKOing him in the second round. But I think Paulo Costa's evolved since then. He's not going to be on the wine. So let's do Adesanya Paulo Costa 2, co-main event of International Fight Week, and even make that 5 rounds if you want to. And then we can have the winner of Pereira and Whittaker fight the winner of Adesanya and Costa, which may mean we get Adesanya Whittaker 3, but I'm not against that. So I think that's what needs to happen. Next, we move on to the winner of the co-main event, Zhang Weili, who recaptured his strawweight belt at UFC 281. Now, what's probably going to happen is the UFC are probably going to give it Rose Namajunas because, who else is going to fight her apart from Carlos Esparza again? And Carlos Esparza probably shouldn't fight her again. But you never know, that could happen as well. But personally, what I think should happen is Amanda Lemos, because you can't give it Jessica Entourage. She destroyed her when they fought. You shouldn't give it Rose Namajunas because Rose Namajunas has beat her twice. You shouldn't give it Carlos Esparza because she just dominated Carlos Esparza. And I know a rematch could go different, but I don't think it would. So Amanda Lemos, it's a fresh matchup. She's coming off a win. Controversial or not, she's coming off a win. So, it's a fresh matchup. It's probably what we should do for the division, and it just keeps things moving along. We now move on to Carlos Esparza, who is obviously the one who lost to Zhang Weili and lost her belt. Now, the UFC could give in Namajunas again because it wasn't really a fight. I know technically on paper she's 2-0, but she should be 1-0 because Carlos Esparza and Rose Namajunas 2 was not a fight. They just had to give a win to someone, so they gave it to Carlos Esparza. Probably as punishment for Rose not fighting, saying, I'm the best, I'm the champ. Well, you're no longer the champ, are you? But probably what the UFC are going to do, like I said, Zhang Weili versus Rose Namajunas. So we'll probably get Carla Esparza versus Amanda Lemos or Carla Esparza versus Rose Namajunas 3. But on paper, Carla Esparza is 2-0 against Rose Namajunas. So I think what I need to do is Carla Esparza versus Marina Rodriguez to keep the division flowing, get some fresh blood. Even though they've lost, it was controversial. So get some fresh blood fighting the top of the divisions, which some people don't want to do. Some divisions don't want to do, but we'll get onto that next. Bit of a spoiler alert. So we'll probably get Carla Esparza versus Marina Rodriguez, so that's what we should do. And then if you're wondering what Rose Namajunas is going to do, I know she wasn't on the card, but just do Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade 3. There we go, strawweight booked. Next, we move on to the Diamond Dustin Poirier. And I alluded to this point when I was talking about Carla Esparza just now. Nobody at the top of lightweight wants to fight the up-and-comers. The best point being, Justin Gaethje will not fight Fiziev. And we really want to see that fight. It needs to happen, but Justin Gaethje just won't do it. But we're going to change that now. Not with Poirier, with Michael Chandler. Personally, I think maybe Poirier should fight down in the division, or I think maybe he should fight Gaethje. I think Dustin Poirier, Gaethje 2 would be a great fight if Gaethje doesn't want to fight Fiziev. But let's say Gaethje does fight Fiziev, because I've seen rumours that it might happen now. And with Makhachev and Volkanovski booked for 284, let's do Poirier versus Beneil Dariush. I almost said Gaethje versus Dariush then, that's why I paused. But let's do Poirier versus Dariush. I don't think it should happen. I think Dariush should sit out now until he gets to fight Islam, weigh in as the backup for Islam and Volkanovski. But let's be honest, the UFC will probably want him as a backup, but they probably won't give him the title fight. So hypothetically, if Gaethje doesn't fight Fiziev, let's do Gaethje Poirier 2. But if Gaethje does fight Fiziev, let's do Poirier versus Dariush. Number one contenders bout. I know if Poirier wins, he's probably going to lose to Islam. But Islam's on a roll right now. And if Volkanovski does pull off the upset against Islam, Volkanovski versus Poirier or Volkanovski versus Dariush could be a banger. Now next up we have Michael Chandler, who's a really exciting guy to make matchups for. You could put him in there with anyone and he'll have a banger. And if I could make any matchup, I'd want to see him fight Conor McGregor, but I don't think Conor McGregor's going to come back, especially with Conor coming out and saying he weighs 265 pounds. So I'm going to give him a Chush Gamrot. Now, I don't want to be that guy that goes off wins and losses. Obviously, I did it with Carla Esparza and Zhang Weili, where I said Zhang Weili should fight Amanda Lemos and Carla Esparza should fight Marina Rodriguez. But Mateusz Gamrot has actually just posted in the last half an hour as I'm making this video. He said, "Hey Michael Chandler, if you still want to be counted as a title contender, let's make a war at Spring and see who's the better wrestler." So I think Michael Chandler versus Mateusz Gamrot actually makes a lot of sense, especially with who I'm going to be giving to Dan Hooker later on. So let's do it. Michael Chandler versus Mateusz Gamrot. We're going to have a banger. Maybe then we'll actually see Michael Chandler use his wrestling more. I know we've seen it a bit against Dustin Poirier. Well, I say a bit, it was for a full round, but I think this could be an actually all-out grappling match with a bit of striking, but mainly grappling. So let's do it. And Mateusz Gamrot's coming off a loss. Michael Chandler's coming off a loss. I think we'd see fireworks all around. Let's get it done. Next up, we move on to Chris Gutierrez, who knocked out Frankie Edgar in the first round. And what a horrible way for Frankie Edgar's career to end, getting knocked out in the first round. But unfortunately, that's the brutality of the sport. And I think Chris Gutierrez should face Pedro Munoz, because I think even though Frankie Edgar's chin, you could argue, was a bit dodgy towards the end of his career, especially against knees. I mean, that Corey Sandhagen knee as well. But I think it only makes sense for Chris Gutierrez to get a ranked fight. And Pedro Munoz is another older fighter in the division. He's coming off that no contest with Sean O'Malley, which was not an eye poke, but we don't need to discuss that. We've seen where Sean O'Malley's gone. This is about Chris Gutierrez. So Chris Gutierrez versus Pedro Munoz at UFC 283 in Brazil, or even the Sao Paulo fight night, which I think is rumoured. So let's get it on one of those cards. I'm sure Chris Gutierrez is ready to go and Pedro Munoz is ready to go. So UFC 283 in Rio de Janeiro seems more realistic. Let's get that matchup made. Next up, we move on to Dan Hooker. And originally, I was going to give him Renato Moicano, but I thought I'm going to give Moicano someone else, because Moicano's definitely going to get a ranked fight now after beating Brad Riddell. So I won't spoil who I'm going to give to Moicano. But then I thought, Dan Hooker just beat Claudio Puelles. He proved he still had it. I know I'm butchering that name, but let's move on. I thought he still got it. So, he probably wants to see if he still got it against someone that's up in the rankings, because obviously Puelles is unranked. So, let's give him the loser of Arman Tsarukyan versus Damir Ismagulov. Now, Damir Ismagulov, that's another name I can't pronounce, but Arman Tsarukyan, I can pronounce that. So I thought let's give him the loser of that, because Arman Tsarukyan, I believe, is ranked number 14th now in the UFC lightweight rankings, or is he 13th? He's 13th or 14th. So I think he's just one underneath Dan Hooker. So the loser of that fight is, I'm not going to say drop to just below Dan Hooker, but they're certainly going to, I mean, if it's Tsarukyan, he's obviously going to stay where he is. So if Tsarukyan loses that fight, Dan Hooker, Tsarukyan makes sense, but Ismagulov makes a little bit less sense if he loses. But I still think we should see the loser of Tsarukyan versus Ismagulov you know what I mean, versus Dan Hooker, because then Dan Hooker can prove it against someone that's not too high in the rankings, whether he's still got the ability to fight, say, bottom 10 to 15, or if he needs to just fight unranked opponents at this point in his career. We now move on to Claudio Puelles, whose name I can't pronounce to save my life, so I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it again. We're just going to refer to him as him. And I think the fight to give him is Drew Dober, because it's not too below Dan Hooker, but it's still outside the rankings. But it's also a fight where if he wins, he might only have to win one more, or he might even get a top 15 fight. So I'm not sure how long he's going to be out for. I'm not sure whether he actually got hurt by Dan Hooker when that fight sequence ended, or if he just kind of gave up. I've seen a few people say maybe he just gave up. So he could be ready to come back by January, February time, but I'm saying March or April. Now, I know Drew Dober could get booked up till then, but if I remember correctly, Drew Dober put something on his Instagram about how he's not looking for a fight necessarily in the next 2 to 3 months. So if I'm remembering that correctly and that is the case, let's do Drew Dober versus Puelles, and I know I've said that wrong, but that's the last time I'm going to attempt to say it, in April Fight Night. Let's do it. Now we're done with the main card. I'm going to be looking at just the winners of the prelims, apart from one fighter who we'll get into in just a moment. But we're going to start off with Renato Moicano, who obviously choked out Brad Riddell in the first round. And originally I was going to give him Dan Hooker, but I thought Jalen Turner is ranked. Okay, I think he's ranked number, I just said Tsarukyan was number 14 or 13. So Jalen Turner must be 14 and Tsarukyan 13. But I may be a bit off there. That was the last time I checked. And I think the reason this matchup makes sense is they're both ranked, and it may push Dan Hooker out the rankings, or it may not get Moicano into the rankings if he loses. But they both choked out Brad Riddell in the first round, and Jalen Turner is known more for his knockouts. So let's do someone who choked out Brad Riddell as a knockout artist versus someone who was able to strike with Brad Riddell, who's a kickboxer, before he choked him out, against a knockout artist. So we're looking at basically primarily the jiu-jitsu versus striking, which is always a good matchup. But Moicano has proved he's got it on the feet, and Jalen Turner has proved, I almost said Brad Riddell, Jalen Turner has proved he's got it a little bit on the ground, but we need to see more of it on the ground. Obviously, if you haven't seen, Brad Riddell has said he's not going to be fighting for a while now. I don't know if that means he never comes back, or if that's just him gone for a little bit, but obviously that also frees up the rankings. But we were going to talk about Brad Riddell anyway, so Moicano versus Jalen Turner, probably once again 283 in Rio de Janeiro, but if not, let's do it in Sao Paulo. Next up, we're talking about Ryan Spann, who viciously KO'd Dominic Reyes in the first round. That was hard to watch, but I've given him 2 matchups, and there's one that's one above him in the rankings, which I'm not going to give him too high, because not only was Dominic Reyes coming off 3 losses in a row, which arguably he should have beat John Jones, and 2 KO losses, but also most of the light heavyweight is booked up right now, so it was a bit hard to give him a matchup that was too high in the rankings. But the one that's above him is Volkan Oezdemir, and I'm giving him this because Oezdemir, he beat Paul Craig, who is 9th, I believe, no, 8th. So Oezdemir is 9th, Paul Craig is 8th, and Oezdemir has just come off a loss to Nikita Krylov. Ryan Spann's 10th. So we can probably do Ryan Spann versus Oezdemir. I'm pretty sure, I don't know about Uzdemir because obviously he fought in October. I don't know how long he's going to be out. But Ryan Spann will have a quick turnaround. So if he wants a quick turnaround and he wants to fight ASAP, he can fight Cleo Roundtree Jr., which is low in the rankings. So I don't think he'd take that. But if he's willing to wait a little bit, give him Uzdemir, and then the winner of that can say if it's Uzdemir, he probably won't fight the winner of Johnny Walker or Paul Craig. But I think if it's Ryan Spann, he'd fight the winner because Paul Craig versus Ryan Spann could be a good matchup, and I'm sure Ryan Spann wants to get his revenge on Johnny Walker. So let's do Ryan Spann versus Uzdemir, and then the winner of that can fight the winner of Paul Craig and Johnny Walker. But then if Ryan Spann doesn't want to wait around, let's give him Cleo Roundtree Jr. Then this is the one loss on the prelims I did want to talk about, and that is Dominic Reyes. In my opinion, and I think a lot of other people's opinions, Dominic Reyes should just hang it up. He's taken 3 brutal KO losses in a row now to Jan, Yuri, and now Ryan Spann. And I know he's young for the game, but 3 brutal KO losses like that, he just doesn't have it like he used to. And I've seen a good suggestion. He should retire, open up a gym before he takes too much damage, and teach MMA because he has got the knowledge. You can even teach it in Teixeira's gym because obviously he was training with Teixeira. But if he does want to take one last fight, I was going to suggest just Dustin Jacoby. I almost said Justin Jacoby then, but Dustin Jacoby, who's ranked number 15th. But I'm pretty sure Jacoby just got a matchup announced, or it's in the works. So I think he should just retire or fight someone outside the rankings. But if they're going to give him one more shot at the rankings, give him Jacoby, ranked number 15th. If he gets knocked out in that or loses, just hang it up and open a gym. But man, it's painful to see Dominic Reyes going out like this. We now move on to Erin Blanchfield, who effortlessly destroyed Molly McCann at UFC 281. And she's made my life easy because she made the call out of Andrea Lee. And let's give it to her. We need to see Erin Blanchfield often because I think she's a real contender for this division. I'm not saying she's going to beat Shevchenko, but she can definitely beat a lot of these women. She can definitely find herself in a title shot in the next year and a half to 2 years if she keeps active. People need to see her often because a lot of casuals, I know this is probably just because they're casuals, but they were like, Molly's going to knock her out in the first round. Well, I said that Erin Blanchfield was going to dominate her. I didn't say she was going to submit her, I will admit that. But I said 30-27, maybe 30-26, but she proved even me wrong by submitting her. So Erin Blanchfield versus Andrea Lee. I know Andrea Lee is susceptible to grappling, but she has proven that she can throw up a few triangles and stuff off the back. So let's say March, April time. Let's get her on a fight night. Not as a main event, but a co-main event could be good for Erin Blanchfield. Definitely get his stock up. Erin Blanchfield and Andrea Lee in a co-main event sounds good. Or put on the prelims of a pay-per-view again. Or who knows, if the card's not that stacked, maybe even the main card opener. But Andrea Lee versus Erin Blanchfield, let's get it done. Finally, we finished this video off with Andre Petroski, who made the call out of both Bo Nickel and GM3. Now, we'll get to GM3 and who else I think he should fight in a minute. But let's talk about Bo Nickel for a second. Bo Nickel is an exceptional talent. He's got people calling him out already, and he hasn't even made his UFC debut. But I don't think Andre Petroski should fight Bo Nickel yet. I said this on the watch-along. Bo Nickel versus Andre Petroski would be an amazing fight. But they're both young in their UFC careers. I mean, Bo Nickel hasn't even made his debut. So what I said was, I think Bo Nickel will easily get ranked. Andre Petroski will find himself in a ranking soon enough if he plays his cards right. So let's hold off until they're both ranked. I'm not saying one of them's got to be champ or they both got to be top 10 or whatever. You could even have it as one of them's top 15 and one of them's trying to break into the rankings. But that would be a great fight. Now, moving on, GM3, I know he's booked in a fight. So it honestly depends on how active Andre Petroski wants to stay. If he wants to stay active, I say he should fight Phil Hawes because I don't believe Phil Hawes is booked, and Phil Hawes is also up in the rankings. But if he doesn't mind waiting, GM3 is a real good test. GM3, I don't want to say he's a gatekeeper of the division, but he gives up and comers a real big test. He can either give you loads of problems, or you can walk through him like Hamzat did. But Hamzat's a different beast. But GM3 is a great matchup for anyone looking to break into the rankings. So I think if Andre Petrosky doesn't mind waiting, fight GM3. If he beats GM3, then we'll talk about getting a ranked opponent. But if he wants to stay active, Phil Hawes is a great fight for him. But there we are, guys. That's every fight I think the UFC should make after UFC 281. I just want to say before I go, thank you for all the support. It's been amazing. I've only had this channel going a week, and we're smashing it in terms of content, in terms of views, and in terms of support. And I can't believe it. I didn't expect to be here after a week. But I have noticed a lot of you are watching the videos, but you're not subscribing. So make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, smash that like button, protect yourself at all times, and I'll see you in the next one.